I'd like to cover a little bit today on tropical rainforests. I'm not going to cover everything in the Canvas notes, but I do want to highlight some things for you. On your Canvas pages, you have the causes of deforestation written out for you, and I would expect you to know that from memory. Also, the consequences of deforestation. I'm not going to cover all of this today, but I would like you to know this from memory. And so I'm going to start by just talking a little bit about some specific things and then try and give you a feel for tropical rainforests. This is a picture of a rainforest in Ecuador off a tributary of the Amazon River. And notice how lush this forest looks. When Europeans first came to the tropics, they assumed by looking at the forests that it would have very high soil fertility and they could grow all kinds of crops there. But in fact, this is not true because of the amount of rain a tropical rainforest gets. This is a picture I took in Costa Rica of the root mat that the trees create on the forest floor. To get this picture, I had to remove all kinds of leaves and leaf litter and decomposing material. And this root mat is designed so it actually holds tropical soils in place during heavy rainfall. When it rains in the tropics, rain is measured in meters rather than inches. And so tropical rainforests get massive amounts of rain, and any nutrients that would be in the soils would be quickly washed away. And so any kind of nutrients from decomposing vegetable matter or animal feces, as soon as they're released, they're rapidly absorbed by this root mat. It's highly efficient. And in fact, they've taken radioactively labeled nutrients such as phosphorus, and 90% of that is absorbed the first day it's put on the soil surface. And so all of the nutrients are actually held within the vegetation. And tropical forest soils in general are very nutrient poor because, again, any nutrients that would be in the soil would be washed away quickly. And here you can see in Costa Rica, we're flying over this area that had been recently deforested, and look at all the topsoil that is washing away because that root mat is no longer in place. Here's another area in Costa Rica that had been recently deforested, and look at all the silt and soil that is washed into the river. And in fact, it's a joke in Costa Rica that topsoil is one of their greatest exports. When we went further up the river to an area where deforestation was not taking place, the water was clear and you don't see all of this silt and topsoil that's been washed in the river. Another thing mentioned in your Canvas pages is slash and burn agriculture. Well, what is slash and burn agriculture? When you cut down the forest and you burn it, and then in that ash are nutrients that are used to grow crops. This type of agriculture was practiced by indigenous people, and it had little impact on the forest because it was done on such a small scale. And so it works because the soils are not fertile, and so the indigenous people would cut a small area, they'd burn it, and then they'd grow crops from the nutrients that were released from the fire. And they could get about 1 to 3 years of growing crops on the area, and then they would abandon the plot and move on to another area. It works really well at low population densities. It works really well on a small scale, but becomes very problematic when you have big populations or large areas of slash and burn agriculture. An example of large-scale slash and burn agriculture would be on the island of Madagascar, which is off the east coast of Africa. And Madagascar is a biodiversity hotspot. It has incredible flora and fauna, but it is being highly threatened by slash and burn agriculture and logging. This is a satellite picture of large-scale slash and burn agriculture in Madagascar. All the red dots on the picture are fires burning at the time the picture was taken. This is a picture I took from a plane when I was flying over Madagascar. Look at the massive extent of slash and burn agriculture. Also notice the erosion that's occurring on those denuded hillsides. These mountains in Madagascar were once covered by a forest. Madagascar has lost 90% of its original vegetation, most of that to slash and burn agriculture. Another threat in certain regions of the Amazon rainforest, especially in Ecuador, is the threat of oil exploration, because it turns out there's potentially a lot of oil in certain areas in Ecuador. That can have an impact on a lot of the local tribes. On the eco lodge I went to, we had an Ashuar guide who was from the local tribe, and he took us to his village. And we actually talked to the chief of the village, and this village is very isolated. There's no roads in the area yet because there hasn't been any oil development. But the chief is very concerned if they do begin oil development, because that would mean roads and infrastructure, and it would have a huge impact on the ecology of the area. And these people are basically subsistence farmers, and the village depends on an intact ecosystem for their survival. I also want to mention a little bit about what's going on in Indonesia, specifically on the island of Borneo, because that's where I have some experience. It's not just slash and burn agriculture that's impacting large areas of tropical forest, but in Southeast Asia, it's basically loss of forest to create palm oil plantations. And so this is a picture I took while flying into Borneo, and you can see a huge area of forest that's been cleared to create room for palm oil plantations. And as we got closer to the runway, on the top, you can see huge palm oil plantations from the air. And then the picture on the bottom right is an area where we were driving through. And both of these areas used to be lowland tropical rainforest, again, being cleared or cleared for the creation of palm oil plantations. And this is when we were driving through a palm oil plantation. And so the picture on the left shows a virgin rainforest in Borneo that I took in a reserve. Notice the multi-layered canopy. You have these emergent trees, you have a lower canopy layer, and you even have a lower canopy layer. And so multi-layered canopies are not only a characteristic of old growth forest, but they're a characteristic of tropical rainforest. And so here we have a virgin forest with an incredible number of tree species. And then on the right, we have a palm oil plantation, which is basically a monoculture of oil palms. These virgin rainforests, these areas that haven't cut, will support over 200 species of resident birds. And then when you replace that with a monoculture palm oil plantation, you only get 9 to 12 species of resident birds. And so a huge loss of biodiversity in your bird fauna. Why is palm oil so popular? Because it's cheap to produce, and there's huge international demand. It's the most widely used vegetable oil in the world. It represents up to 40% of total oil consumption in the world. But there are some areas in Borneo that are protected. We got to visit a couple of those on a trip that I took there. And this is an incredible area called the Danam Valley Conservation Area. Note that there's a gate and a guard station. Poaching is a huge concern in this area. They still have clouded leopards, they have pangolins, they have orangutans, and they have a number of wildlife species in this area that are poached for the wildlife trade. But absolutely an incredible area. It's a primeval rainforest. The rainforests of Southeast Asia are believed to be some of the world's oldest rainforests. Some of them are at least 130 million years old. These rainforests can have as many as 1,200 species of trees found in a 52-acre plot. And so incredible species diversity in terms of trees, incredible species diversity in terms of birds, mammals, reptiles, and amphibians. They had a canopy walk where we could walk through the canopy. And again, just to give you a feel of the multi-layered canopy that you have in these very rich rainforests. And this is a picture I actually took looking from a hillside down into the lowland tropical forest. And again, you can see that multi-layered canopy. Again, incredible species diversity, including primates. These are very rare red leaf monkeys that I photographed while walking on a trail. The second trip I made to this area, we had several orangutan sightings. It's one of the forests of Borneo are one of the two places in the world where orangutans can still be found in the wild. They're also found on the island of Sumatra. And here you can see a female orangutan and her baby in the canopy, and we actually got to watch her create a nest in the top of the tree for the evening when we were on a canopy walk. And then some pretty unique primates. This is a tarsier. If you look at the small inserted picture on the left, you can see it's a little bigger than a human hand. A very primitive nocturnal primate that we were very lucky to see. It's active at night and it feeds on insects. Another incredible bird that we saw is this large pheasant species called the great argus, almost extinct due to habitat loss and hunting. They create a dancing area to attract females, and that's how we found this one. What you see it on its dancing area, and it was calling for a female. And then some unique amphibians. This is a Bornean horned frog. This is a Bornean keeled pit viper, a poisonous snake. I obviously took this picture with a telephoto lens. It's a sit and wait predator and sits very quietly and blends in with the vegetation. And then an interesting flying, not really flying, but gliding mammal called a colugo. And we saw this actually in another lowland tropical forest area. Borneo has a number of gliding animals. They have gliding mammals such as this colugo. They have a number of gliding frogs. This is a gliding frog called Wallace's flying frog. The rainforests of Borneo differ from the rainforests of the Amazon in that they don't have lots of vines and lianas to get from one tree to another. So animals that don't glide actually have to climb down the tree to the forest floor and then climb up another tree. It takes a lot of energy and it exposes them to predators. So it's much more efficient if an animal can glide from one tree to another. And so you have flying snakes, which are actually gliding snakes, flying lizards that are actually gliding lizards, and then a gliding frog like this, Wallace's flying frog. Another unique area in Borneo we visited was the Kinabatangan River. Fairly easy to photograph wildlife there because you're sitting in a boat rather than hiking through the jungle. And we saw a lot of interesting species. Here is some of my photographer friends that I was with taking a little break and going through some of the images that we were taking earlier in the day while going down the river. And so we saw things like proboscis monkeys. Again, incredible primate diversity in this area. Many species of hornbills, and these are large fruit-eating birds that are also threatened by the illegal wildlife trade. Pigtail macaques. And we even were lucky enough to see a very small elephant the world's smallest elephant called the Bornean pygmy elephant. So anyway, a little bit of an intro into what it's like to be in a tropical forest. And I want to keep this as short as possible, and so I think I'm going to quit right here.